So, what's going on, guys? What's going on? So, we have a an interesting situation happening right now with banks failing. Silicon Valley Bank, as you know, just plopped dead, and there's a lot more going on beneath the surface that you may not know about. And we're going to talk about bank failures and whether or not this is something you should be concerned about. If so, what can you do to kind of protect yourself? So get comfortable, buckle up a seatbelt. We're going to get started on the Black Financial Channel right now. Welcome to the Black Financial Channel. That's theblackfinancialchannel.com. My name is Dr. Boyce Watkins. I am your friendly neighborhood finance professor. On the Black Financial Channel, we talk about Black wealth and Black economics every single day, sometimes as much as 10 times a day under one condition. The condition is that we are Black first. Black first means that we put our community at the top of our priority list. Black first means we educate our kids. Black first means we prepare for the future. Black first means that we believe that being financially intelligent is the same as being Black. So if you believe in Black financial intelligence, put a B1 in the chat. Also, let me know what city you're from. I am right now in Los Angeles in my last day. We did a Black Wealth Boot Camp this weekend. It was extraordinary. Thank you to all of you who came out. We had an amazing time. And we did a full Black Wealth training on the new book I just wrote called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power, which is actually, by the way, I got to brag. It is now a #1 bestseller on Amazon right now in the public finance category. So thank you all for supporting this book. We did this. Intelligent Black people did this. We made this book into a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And I want to say thank you to everybody who left a review, everybody who bought a copy. I guarantee you it'll change your life if you haven't taken a look yet. And I'm super proud of this because you're not talking to a corporate Negro. I don't have corporations backing me. I don't have some major network backing me, Revolt TV, none of that stuff. I don't have a book deal. I've never signed a book deal in my life. I've never signed a radio deal or TV deal. We built this whole business with our bare hands. It's 100% Black owned, and we're getting it done. So thank you so much to those of you who helped make this happen. I will never forget you. All right. So anyway, let's keep on going. All right. So right now, how many of you, give me a yes or no, how many of you have paid attention to what's going on with Silicon Valley Bank? How many of you have noticed this bank failure? Maybe you were concerned about it. Maybe you were trying to look for information on it, trying to get a sense of like what's going on with this and whether it's good or bad or what's happening with this. How many of you have been paying attention to what happened with Silicon Valley Bank? It's been kind of crazy. A lot of people are very worried about it. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. As much as I wish I could sit here and tell you something good, as much as I wish I could say, "Oh, don't worry, it's just a standard run-of-the-mill bank failure. Who cares? Who cares? It's not a big deal." If I said that to you, if I acted like it wasn't a big deal, if I acted like it wasn't something worth paying attention to, I'd be lying my butt off because bank failures are a big deal. When banks fail, it's a very big deal for a lot of reasons that relate to an area that I wrote my dissertation on. And my dissertation was written on financial psychology. And one of the things about financial psychology is that there are so many areas where self-fulfilling prophecies really come to pass. That which you believe in, you give power to. That which you actually commit to and pour into and support, that tends to have a greater likelihood of manifesting. Like, for example, imagine if I have a baby and I say, "Oh, that's not a real baby, and that baby doesn't need to eat. I'm not going to feed the baby. If it's a great baby, then the baby's going to live on its own. If it's not meant to live, it's just going to die, and it doesn't matter if I feed it or not." Well, what's going to happen to that baby? If I don't feed the baby and I don't love the baby, then what's going to happen to the baby? Is that baby going to be healthy? Is that baby going to survive? Is that baby going to make it to adulthood? No, of course not. The baby's not going to make it. So economically speaking, a bank or a business is like a baby. Part of the reason that Black-owned businesses struggle, part of the reason Black-owned businesses don't grow, part of the reason that Black economics does not grow is because you don't feed the baby. You are all feeding white people's babies. You're doing the same thing that the people on the plantation did. You're nursing the little white baby. You're going to work at the big white-owned corporation, and that's where you're pouring your energy into. That's what you have your confidence in. That's what you're committed to. And the little Black-owned business, you don't respect it. You don't think about it. You ain't got time to put any energy into it. So what happens to Black-owned businesses? Well, they flop and then they die, right? So basically, bank failures are kind of the same way. We choose and we commit to certain banks. We have confidence in certain banks and we have no confidence in others. Banks that we commit to, that we pour into, that we have confidence in, they thrive, they prosper, they do well, right? But when a bank makes us nervous, when there's any chance that this ain't gonna go right, when we're a little nervous, a little scared, like a bad relationship, when you see a couple red flags. Anybody ever date somebody and have a red flag? What happens when you see the red flags in relationships? Ladies, tell me, what happens if you go on a couple of dates with a dude and he showed you a couple of red flags? Maybe he's using drugs, or he beats up women, or he's he's a lying dog or whatever. What do? You run, you put on your track shoes and you like out of there. So it's not, and remember, this could be a great man. He just might have shown you, a couple of things that maybe a couple of years later you would have looked past that, or you would have been able to forgive it. But because it's early and it's a red flag, you're kind of like, I don't want to invest more of my time and energy into this person because I don't like what I'm seeing right now. So banks, it's kind of the same way. So here's where I'm getting at. Silicon Valley Bank is not a bad bank. These executives that ran Silicon Valley Bank were not stupid people. They were doing a decent job. The decision making that they engaged in was not terrible decision making. They just ran into a bunch of negative headwinds that caused red flags to appear, which caused people to put on their track shoes and run away. And so what are some of those headwinds they ran into? Well, here's what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. So they were getting all this money, all these deposits at a time where interest rates were extremely low. So what they did was they did the safe thing. They put a lot of that money into long-term corporate bonds, which were yielding very small amounts of money, but that was a good place to put their money because they're like, oh, it's safe, it's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. Well, then the Federal Reserve comes along, bump, 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 and they say, oh, the economy's, we got this inflation problem. Now, mind you, they created the inflation problem. I want to make that clear. The Federal Reserve caused the damn inflation problem, and experts like me were sitting here screaming and hollering and saying, you're going to have an inflation problem if you keep pumping this money into the economy. We're in the pandemic, yes, but you don't have to keep pumping money into the economy. They kept pumping and pumping and pumping, and then they're like, oh, there's inflation. What are we going to do? Well, we told you. We told you that there was going to be an inflation problem. Now you got 6, 7, 8% inflation. People are freaking out over that. So then the Federal Reserve is like, oh, no, we got to stop inflation. So what do? Well, they increase interest rates, because when they increase the federal funds rate, that's what they call it, it causes inflation, because you're basically purposely putting the brakes on the economy. You're purposely undermining economic growth. When you grow too fast, it causes your inflation. So you're trying to slow things down. Well, here's what happened, though. As they were pumping up those risk-free interest rates, it was causing the value of Silicon Valley Bank's corporate bonds to go down, because you have these bonds that you bought that are paying 1.5%. But now the Fed is like, oh, you can get 4%, on short-term risk-free assets. So what then happens is not only the value of your bonds going down, so the value of your assets are going down, but then also you have a problem with your liabilities. You have a problem with your depositors, because now your depositors are like, why would I put my money in your bank when I can go over here and buy a money market or a T-bill and make a whole lot more interest on my T-bill than I can by investing in your bank? So they were losing deposits. And here's the other thing too. So as Silicon Valley Bank was losing money, they then made the public announcement for full disclosure, hey, we got to sell some of our bonds to shore up some of these losses that we're having, and we got to go raise some capital. Well, then what happens is the biggest culprit, the biggest money killer on earth steps into the room. I'm talking about the most gangster, scariest. Imagine the Suge Knight of finance coming in the room. The biggest, monstrous, scariest thing in the financial world is this thing called fear. Fear. When fear is in the room, nothing grows. Like, think about it. It's just like money. You think of money, economy is just like love. If you are afraid of the person that you're dating, you are not going to properly love them. You're not going to be open. You're not going to do all the things that are conducive to a healthy relationship. So some of y'all who make all your decisions based on fear, just know that you're blocking a lot of blessings, because fear will put you in a prison that will keep you from taking the chances that you need to take in order to experience the highs and lows of life, right? So when fear comes in the room, there's a problem. So here's what happened. With Silicon Valley Bank, all of the venture capitalists that were supporting these companies that were putting their money in Silicon Valley Bank, remember, it's called Silicon Valley Bank, well, because a lot of the depositors were in, Silicon Valley, right? So Silicon Valley Bank announces they're having financial problems. This is a financial red flag that they announced. Well, once they announce this financial red flag, well, the VCs start advising the companies that they own a chunk of to take their money out of Silicon Valley Bank. So you have a run on the bank. When you have a run on the bank, everything goes to shit. It just when there's a run on the bank, then it's like when we all decide we're not going to feed the baby anymore, or we're not going to pour our energy into something anymore. We got the small business. We're not going to spend any time on the business anymore. Well, that business is going to die. So basically, the depositors who were showing faith in Silicon Valley Bank were walking away and pulling their money out. And the more they pulled their money out, the more it hurt the bank, the more the bank was struggling. And next thing you know, the bank announces that they're about to collapse. So this is interesting. This is a problem for a couple of reasons. And before I dig into that further, I'd like to ask you, if you could, really quickly, please hit the thumbs up button, thumbs up, share, subscribe. I have to warn you also that because our platform has grown over time, there are fake Boyce Watkins accounts out there that will reach out and they'll say something like, inbox me, fam. I don't even talk like that. I don't even say inbox me, fam. So if you see something like that and they're inboxing, asking you to inbox, and they're trying to start a conversation with you and trying to get you to invest in their crypto, please don't do it, because do not know these people. These are scammers in some other country. So I just want to make sure that you're protected. So if you see an account like that, please report it. I would really appreciate that. Please hit the thumbs up button, thumbs up, share, subscribe. Also at my website, boycewatkins.com, I do have a training called How to Make Money Without Working. It's all about selling stock options, how I make money doing that. So if you are interested in taking a look at that, feel free to go to my website, boycewatkins.com. All right, so let's hop back into this. Okay, so the interesting thing about the Silicon Valley Bank is that it reminds me of when Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke after the Great Depression. And he said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Does anybody remember that? Give me a yes if you've ever heard that phrase. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. Give me a yes or no. All right. So that statement, we have nothing to fear but fear itself, what that basically means is that fear creates its own fear. You know, it's like when your mama would smack you and you start crying, and she's like, keep crying, I'm gonna give you something to cry about, or I'm gonna smack you again and really give you something to cry about. But you're like, but you already made me cry. And so you give me something to cry about. I don't need something to cry about. I'm already crying. And now the more that I cry, the more I'm gonna get smacked again, the more I'm gonna get cried more. So we gotta stop that abuse, by the way. Stop slapping your kids. Like, talk to them instead. Like, we gotta get rid of that. That was my generation. And I know we take pride in the fact that our mamas used to smack the hell out of us, but we gotta let that go. I talk to my kids. I don't want to smack them. It does not make me feel good to hit them, right? And so anyway, I'm not trying to be a hippie here. I'm just trying to be honest. So fear does the same thing. Fear can manifest itself. When you have fear in an economic system, what it does is everything locks up. And this is why the bank failures are such a problem. It's not so much just what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. If you look at it from a functional standpoint, in terms of all the economic exposure Silicon Valley Bank has, with companies all throughout the country, it's not that great. I mean, the actual numbers in terms of, how they're going to affect you and me economically are non-existent. No, we don't have money in that bank. We're not doing business with that bank. A lot of you aren't even doing business with any company that's doing business with that bank, right? So to some extent, it can be isolated. But the problem is that you have this thing called the media, and the media has put fear into the headline because that's how they sell newspapers. They sell. The studies show that they have that saying, if it bleeds, it leads. Well, a lot of that's because all their studies show that people will buy more of your newspapers if you scare the hell out of them, right? So they're putting fear in the headlines all across the country. How many of you have been like nervous now that you've seen this bank failure? How many of you have been like, oh my God, whoa, this is a big deal, right? And and I don't blame you. I admitted to you. I said, yeah, you have a reason to be nervous, but the reason you have a reason to be nervous is because everybody's nervous. See, what makes me nervous is not what's happening. What makes me nervous is that everybody's nervous. Do you follow what I'm saying? Tell me if you get what I'm saying. I'm kind of, I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying here, because I'm kind of saying something that almost sounds like I'm being repetitive here. But the reason I'm nervous is because so many people are nervous. Because when people are nervous, economic potential, economic activity tends to lock up. Why? Well, because you have fear in the room, and fear is the cousin of trust, right? So when you have fear, you lose trust, and when you lose trust, people stop moving. People just sit there frozen, afraid. If they have money, they don't spend it. They hold on to it. If you're thinking about making that investment, you don't let it go because you're like, man, I got to hold on to my money because I don't know what's going to happen. So you have a lot of uncertainty, and you have a lot of other issues going on right now. So I think that the biggest goal of all of these politicians, which they just don't make good decisions financially, so I don't have a lot of faith in them, to be honest with you. But the biggest goal of the politicians is they got to squash this fear. They have to somehow communicate that this incident is isolated. Somebody asked in the chat on my Instagram. My Instagram is the real Boyce Watkins, by the way. Somebody asked me on the chat. I saw the question. I just couldn't. I can't answer the question sometimes because I don't want to lose the flow of thought. Because literally, if I stop and answer your question, I'm gonna forget what I was talking about. But they asked about crypto. How will this affect crypto? Well, it already has. You saw Bitcoin and all the crypto started dropping. Well, because you have a bank that is in Silicon Valley. The reason that this fear is so heavy is because we used to think that the people in Silicon Valley were the smart guys. We thought that these were the ones who knew how to make money. We thought these were the ones who knew how to protect their investment. So if the Silicon Valley guys are scared, well, you should get scared. It's like I told you all I've been taking flight lessons, and I'm real excited, by the way, because my room. I wish I could show you the view out my window. I literally am right next to LAX. This is where we have the Black Wealth Boot Camp. I'm right next to LAX, and I got a chance to watch airplanes take off and land. And I've been learning how to fly. I've been talking to my flight instructor every other day. And I was listening on the radio to the communications with the pilots, and it was exciting. I was like a kid in a candy store, right? So I was really pumped up because I love flying. And let me tell you this, right? I got my flight instructor. Part of what gave me confidence in flying and landing airplanes and taking off is because my flight instructor is the coolest dude on the planet. He knows what he's doing. He's a young guy, but I have so much faith in him. He went to Purdue, the best flight school in the world, also, right? So okay, I'm getting to the point. I promise you. So part of what gives me confidence when I get in the airplane with him, when I don't know what the hell is going on, is that he always has an answer to my questions. He never freaks out. He never panics. We've had situations where the plane went into a straight nosedive and he just said, oh, okay, let's just pull back. Let's just do this. Let's just change that. He didn't freak out. He never freaked out. So imagine how I would feel. I'm going full circle with this analogy, I promise. Imagine how I would feel if we were in the plane and something happened and my flight instructor is like, oh, shit. Right. And he gets nervous. He's like, oh, I don't want to die. Right. And he starts getting scared. Well, what do you think it's going to do to me? Because he's the one that knows what's going on. I don't even know what's going on. Right. I can't take over the plane if he doesn't know what's happening. Right. So what is going on right now is the economic engine of America, the economic airplane, the pilot is panicking. The Silicon Valley guys, do you understand that there was a 3 or 4 year period where about a third of the world's wealth was being generated in Silicon Valley? These were the smartest of the smart. So if they're panicking, if they're pissed off because they got to sit outside a bank and beg to get their money back, or they're losing 90% of their money, like their companies are flopping because most of that money they had in the bank is not covered by FDIC insurance. $250,000 is nothing when you had 30 million in the bank, right? So how do you think that's going to make the rest of America feel? So a big part of the reason that this bank failure bothers me and worries me. Oh my God, it worries me. It's because it's happening in Silicon Valley, and somebody said this plane has become Soul Plane. It's like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that the smartest people in America are panicking right now over the economic system, and that doesn't mean that everybody else should be panicking too. So they got a big task on their hands. If I'm with the Biden administration, I advise them, you got to find some way to help people somehow come to a belief that this was an isolated incident, that this can't happen to them, or that their bank isn't going to, because what's going to happen is that there is such a thing called financial contagion, which isn't just mechanical, but it's also emotional. Again, that was another thing I studied a lot in my doctoral program. Professor Andrew Caroli, shout out to him. He was my dissertation chair. He's one of the best experts on financial contagion. He's at Cornell University if you want to look him up. And basically, financial contagion means that there are going to be other banks that are going to have a run on the bank because Silicon Valley Bank had a run on their bank. Any bank that has any connection to Silicon Valley Bank or any exposure whatsoever to anything that they were invested in is at risk of having a run on the bank. That's why whenever something like this happens, first things that banks tend to do is they make a public announcement to say, hey, look, we're not even involved. We weren't even there. I don't do any business with this bank. They have to do that because they're trying to avoid that financial virus called fear. Fear is literally one of the worst things to pop up in an economic system. In fact, Black people, one of the reasons that a lot of you have trouble starting businesses or building wealth with your relatives is because you're afraid of each other. Think about this. You don't believe me? Let me give you an example. How many of you made a decision years ago that you're never going to loan money to relatives? Like I just don't, when people ask me, I've heard people say it all the time. Like when people ask me to borrow money, I just say no. Right? How many of you have said that before or feel that way? Or maybe you're thinking about doing that? Give me a yes in the chat. Come on, be honest. What that is that's fear. You have a fear that if I loan money to my cousin, somebody I should be economically aligned with, right? Your cousin, your family is supposed to be, those are supposed to be the people you're making money with. But you're afraid of the people who are close to you. You're afraid. Think about this. If you are scared of your friends, then you don't need enemies. If your friends are the ones who hurt you the most, then the enemies are, you don't even need to have enemies if your friends are also your enemies too. So that fear component is really big. And that's why it's very important. And one of the things I wrote extensively about in my book is called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. Feel free to go to Amazon or my website, boycewatkins.com, if you want to take a look. Is I talk about how fear and the lack of trust causes us to miss out on economic opportunities. So one of the things you can do if you want your family to have what codes of conduct. Like one simple code of conduct that I push on my children is that if you borrow money from a family member, you must pay that money back. Because if you do not pay them back, you are going to financially traumatize them, and they're going to be afraid to invest in anybody's business. They're going to be afraid to show financial love to anything or anybody because they're so scared that they're going to lose their money again. So do not financially traumatize each other. So if you are that sucker out there who borrows money and doesn't pay it back, stop doing that because you are financially traumatizing your family members. Financial trauma is very real. That's why in the Black Business School, we created the first ever Black financial therapy department. We partnered with the best Black therapists on the planet, and they were the ones who helped us to put this together. Now, somebody says I'm breaking up. Am I still hearable? Let me know if you can hear me. If not, I'm going to go ahead and shut this down anyway. I'm about to go take me a nap. So anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope that this conversation was helpful to you. If you could, please hit the thumbs up button, thumbs up, share, subscribe on the way out. Also, my website is boycewatkins.com. So if you'd like to take a look at that lecture, How to Make Money Without Working, or take a look at financial flashcards for children, please visit boycewatkins.com. So sorry it's choppy. My Wi-Fi will be better next time. So sorry about that. I'm going to head on out, guys. God bless you. Take care now. Talk to you soon. Peace.